Welcome to this second edition of the EuroMENA show, the European and Middle East and North African show, an event organized by the Friedrich Naumann Foundation's Madrid office. We thank Casa Árabe for its cooperation to this event, and I would also like to thank the Middle East and North African office of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in Amman, Jordan. The panel we are presenting today, with guests here in the studio and also via Zoom, is organized with cooperation by the Friedrich Naumann Foundation's office in Turkey as well. And I will now introduce the guests that we have to discuss the important topic of migrations. First, joining me here at the studio is Mrs. Maria Millar. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me here.
And welcome. Maria Millar is an associate professor doctor at the Department of Sociology at UNED University here in Madrid. She is also a researcher at FUNCAS, which is a research think tank on economics, and she specializes in international migration, migration statistics, administrative registers, labor market and migration, and immigration policies. Thank you very much, Mrs. Millar, for joining us. Through the Zoom connection, we have Mrs. Başak Yavchan in Belgium. She's a researcher in migration governance at the Hugo Observatory of the University of Liège in Belgium. And she's also an associate professor of political science and international relations at Top University of Economics and Technology in Turkey. Thank you, Mrs. Yavchan, for joining us via Zoom today.
Thank you. Greetings from Brussels.
And finally, also via Zoom and also from Brussels, we have Mr. Jean-Christophe Hutzen. He's a member of the European Parliament for the FDP, the Freie Demokratische Partei, the Liberal Party of Germany, and therefore a member of the Renew Europe Parliamentary Group. He is also the co-author of the said parliamentary group, the Renew Europe Group's vision paper for European migration and asylum policy. Thank you very much, Mr. Hutzen, and welcome.
Thanks for inviting me, and greetings from the European Parliament.
So, to start our conversation today, we shall start with Maria Millar joining me here at the studio. One of your research on immigrant origin youth pointed out several relevant aspects concerning education and the labor market when it comes to the young immigrants. Do you consider that youth is not properly included in the proposals on economic integration of migrants? What should be done in this regard?
Well, I think there is still a lot of job to do regarding that. Of course, it's not enough included because, for example, youth who arrived alone, under 18, for example in Spain, when they are 18, they are alone there. There's no policy to help them to integrate. So, first of all, we have to focus on that, for example, not leaving them without anything to do, without any help. Second, we have to understand that these young people, not only those who arrived alone, but also children from immigrants, second generation and 1.5 generation, they face many problems regarding their integration into the educational system and the integration into the labor market. They face many problems that are common to the problems that native origin youth also face because they are coming from low class origin. So many of these problems are common problems that we have to face into a broad perspective to understand that we have to protect them from poverty, but also that we have to invest a lot in their education to help them for their future into the labor market. So I think this is one of the main strategies that we have to follow, investing into the labor market and understand they are coming from, most of them, they are coming from low class. So they have the same problems than the other. We have to understand they have also specific problems, but it's a general problem. And last, but not less important, we also have, when speaking about immigration policies, we can also think about emigration. Emigration from rich countries like Spain or South European countries that suffer a lot of immigration from youth, from native origin. And we can also think that this is not a bad thing to immigrate, but we can design policies to have them back. It is good to go abroad, to gain international experience, but for our countries it would be very nice to have them back and gain their human capital that we have invested in it, and they have improved it while being abroad.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I would like to ask Mr. Jean-Christophe Oetjen. Well, in several occasions you have mentioned before in the past the need of a European vision for labor migration. Do you consider that the coordination among member states would be the key to implement economic integration mechanisms for migrants in Europe? What is your take about this?
Well, thanks for this question. First of all, immigration to the labor market is national competence. So the member states have their approaches on this issue. But if we look at immigrants coming from outside Europe, they don't aim, or very often don't aim a special state. They are looking for opportunities, they want to work, they want to earn money, and they want to go to Europe. But they don't aim Belgium or Germany or Sweden or Spain particularly. From our perspective, a common European approach would help to channel those migrants to the countries that are in need of labor force, because we have very different situations on the different labor markets in Europe. For example, we in Germany, we are in need of people coming to Germany in order to work on the labor market. Other countries may say, we don't need further immigrants. So but with an European approach, you could try to give a common platform. We proposed, for example, a talent pool where you can apply for when you are outside Europe. And then the member states say, okay, we're in need of particular migrants, particular abilities, specialties, and can pick migrants to come to their labor market, to their country. And with such a common approach, this would help to channel migrants and to bring them where their labor force is needed. And on the other hand, with such a common approach, this could help as well in order to identify which is the need for the migrants in the member state. So what has the member state to do in order to facilitate immigration and in order to facilitate the integration into the labor market, because this does not come on its own, but we need policies in order to enable such an integration into the labor market.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. Oetjen. As the first question for Mrs. Yavchan, I would like to ask you, Turkey, the country hosting the largest number of forcibly displaced persons in the world, as you have mentioned in one of your recent publications, in Turkey, local municipalities are the forefront of providing public services and support for the socio-economic integration of migrants. Could you mention some of the best practices in this regard?
Sure. Thank you very much for this question and putting the municipalities under the spotlight, because they're very important in regards to integration policy as they are implementers of it. And there are different logics of integration taking place at the local level. At the national level, the status of the refugee or migrant in general is very important. But at the local level, it doesn't really matter because, the pressure is there, both from the host community and from the migrant population. And integration actually takes place locally while the policy is made nationally. So in Turkey, you have a temporary protection status granted to Syrian refugees in particular. There are about 3.6 million Syrian refugees being hosted in Turkey. And this status allows them to have access to education, healthcare, and social aid, and to a limited extent to formal employment. And when we assess both the legal rights provided and the implementation, several areas of refugee integration Turkey is doing great. But in terms of several areas, there are still need for improvement. And this is where the municipalities kick in. And just as anywhere in the world, some municipalities are more like sanctuary cities. They are very inclusive, and others are not so much. The same goes on with Turkey. I'll tell you a couple examples that we come across in doing our research and try to understand why this is the case and why this could be the case. So in regards to employment, as I mentioned, even though there are about 1 million Syrian refugees estimated to be working, this is informally. The work permits do not exceed actually 100,000 at the moment. So that means that's also reflected at the local level in our interviews. When we talk to municipalities, employment is a big issue. Therefore, several municipalities are providing, for instance, cash work for work programs such as Gaziantep municipality or Adana, where parks and recreation work is given to refugees in particular as part of the formal work. And there are also the issue of empowering women in this employment process is very important. Again, Gaziantep and Adana municipalities have set up women cooperatives where they promote mutual production, especially in terms of processed agricultural goods. Of course, many municipalities across Turkey provide, such as Sultanbeyli in Istanbul or Ankara provide trainings, skills trainings in Şanlıurfa as well. These could be language trainings because Syrian refugees' mother tongue is Arabic and a lot of Turkish language training is needed, but this is also skills training in the areas which is needed in the labor market usually, or also for entrepreneurship. The second area where municipalities raise concern with regards to the national policy is the shortcomings of national policy is the issue of social cohesion. So here we have some policies of promoting civic participation. For instance, Izmir, Konak, and Karabağlar district municipalities started this very early in the game. So did Gaziantep and Urfa. They have refugee councils embedded in the city councils. And this is very important as they not only advise, but also promote certain policies. For instance, with regards to during the pandemic, in the early times of the pandemic, the refugee population did experience major difficulties in paying their rents and utility bills. And the many solidarity networks have been established initiated by these councils. So I would say, and the same goes with in Izmir again, you have anti-discrimination ateliers, storytelling workshops that try to promote this mutual understanding among the peers of the population. So you can see that municipalities in Turkey not only advancing the implementation, advancing the integration policy through implementation of national legislation, but also they come up with their own policies. So this takes, of course, a proactive leadership, a permissive legal framework, and bureaucratic and economic capacity. And municipalities don't always have all of them, but what we have came to observe is those municipalities that succeeded in being part of these good examples framework are the ones that managed to establish good multi-level partnerships. And many of these partnerships have existed before, actually. They have been doing EU projects, or they have been cooperating with GIZ of Germany for certain policies, for certain practices regarding vulnerable population. And now those are transferred to refugees. And those that have had some experience in in this did actually better. And there are also some very good projects and municipalities unions and projects such as Swedish funded Reslog that promote this mutual learning, providing information, promoting a wider network and mutual learning among municipalities. So I believe that they should be more in the forefront of our focus, and also international cooperation also when frameworks such as the EU-Turkey Migration Pact is considered.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Yavchan. Mr. Utchen, the European perspective that you have envisaged, that you have exposed before, which is clearly based on liberal principles, might sometimes be confronted by the harsh positions of several member states and also some parties in opposition which have a populistic narrative against migration globally and specifically about the current migrants in Europe, and even against the refugees sometimes. So what we are facing in Europe right now is this kind of negative narratives on migration, which are sometimes treating the issue of migration like an incredible bomb which is exploding on our countries. What would you tell to them? What would be your counter narrative as a liberal politician?
But first of all, I always say to them that migration has always been part of human history, and without migration, we would not have progress, we would not have innovation. So migration is a key enabler for advancing our societies. And this is not about changing our societies. It's in a way that you leave behind all what has been there in the past. It's about evolution, and it's about being open and learning new things. And learning new things is something that is not something that only migrants have to do. It's something that all of us have to do. So from my point of view, it's about migration is something normal that we have to accept and to integrate into our policies. Then. What I very often hear is that if we do kind of policy frameworks for labor migration, then there are even more migrants coming to Europe. But that's not the question from my point of view. Today, the people are coming. They ask for asylum, even if they're economic migrants. And what we need to do is to separate those flows, to see who of those people are asylum seekers that are in need of help, who are the people that flee from war, for example, that need our help or European solidarity, and who are the others that are economic migrants, which is nothing bad. Just to be clear, my ancestors were economic migrants. They were going to the US and willing to work in the US. So this is something normal, but on the other hand, we as Europeans have to choose who are those coming for economic purposes, to choose those who fit for our labor market, and that's where we have to be kind of very clear. This can be a win-win situation for European societies and for migrants if they fit to our society and if they fit to our labor market. And for me, it's very important to say that in the migration crisis that we had 2015 and 16, Germany has been very open to help those who were in need of help. Today, more than 50% of them have a job. They're working in Germany and they are contributing to our national economy. So this has been something beneficial for the German society. And perhaps someday, when war is over in Syria, and we hope this will arrive one day, they will go home and they have achieved some skills, they have experience in Germany, and they will be ambassadors for a new cooperation with such countries. So from my point of view, this is something beneficial for host countries. This is something beneficial for migrants. If we all are open, if we don't, let's say, if we are not too idealistic, because migration brings problems. This is something very clear, and not only for host communities, but for migrants as well. Migration is not something very easy. This is something which can be very hard for a migrant, and we have to realize this. But this can be very positive for our societies, we as liberals, we are positive people, we are open people, so we see the positive side of things.
Thank you, Mr. Rötchen. Mrs. Millar, would you more or less follow and agree to what Mr. Rötchen was saying? Because here in Spain, and you are a specialist in migrant youth, we have seen very recently some very harsh messages and narratives against migrant youth, even saying that, well, they are minors who are of military age. I have even heard the expression that they are of military age, that they do gang raping and that they kill people and that they do every kind of illegal businesses. But of course, this is just a very small minority of those people who have come, especially in the very vulnerable situation of being an unaccompanied minor in Spain. What would you tell those who have this kind of narratives?
Well, there is something curious about public opinion and immigration is that public opinion don't get very worried about migration flows, even when they are bigger. For example, in Spain, migration was not one of the main problems for Spanish population, almost never, even when a lot of them were arriving in very high numbers, like the year 2007, 2008, 900,000 people were arriving each year. And population was okay with that. There was not a problem in the surveys. When they named immigration as a problem, was when there was problems in the border. I don't know why, but population is very, they react a lot when there is something in the border. It's like they feel their national identity threatened or something like that. So, and media make a thing of it too, even if the numbers are so low, because so low. For example, if suddenly there is 1,000 people arriving to the border, 20,000. But what is this number when compared to 900,000? And population didn't have any problem with 900,000. But suddenly they have the problem with 1,000. Why? So it's very curious that this is happening, and I think it's very related with the media and how suddenly they have a video of people climbing a wall. And this is so visual that for the population it's a shock, even if in reality they are okay. And for example, Spanish population comparing to other countries, they have adapted quite well to immigration. So it's just more about sensationalism than other thing, because considering how fast the process has been in Spain, that in 2000 we didn't have any migration in Spain. It was about 2%, and suddenly 10 years later it was 13% of the population. So that has been so fast, and population has been, well, of course there is racist problems, and it's not a fairy tale, but I think we can be satisfied, and we have to learn from that, what we have done well in the past, to continue to improve it. So, yeah.
So before wrapping up, I would like to ask the three of you one question that may provoke some debate between the three guests, and it is: do you consider it fundamental to have to implement effective economic integration policies for the migrants between the European countries? Maybe you can start.
Well, I think yeah, it's important that there is a European approach regarding that. Because as Jean-Christophe said before, most of migrants that want to come to Europe is not exactly that, for some of them, it's not exactly that they want to go to Germany or Spain. They just come to Europe. Mm-hmm. But it is also true that there are immigrant networks, very important. So they want to come to Europe, but maybe they have a cousin who lives in Stockholm, or maybe they have a friend who went to Berlin. So it could be good that from European Union we have this more broad approach, taking into account what the migrants want, where do they want to go exactly in Europe, because they have an opinion on that, and that we implement the incentive to address them to the places we need and the sectors we need. In the way that they feel free and they can choose, but also that is a mutual benefit for everybody. Yeah. And regarding that, there are some practical proposals on how to manage that the European Union can push. For example, ideas like skill training in countries of origin, that will also benefit countries of origin. For example, training nurses in Morocco. So some of them will stay in the countries, or some others will come to Europe. So this will help everybody, and this can be enforced by European Union.
Mr. Utzan, what would be your take on this?
First of all, I agree on what just has been said. There are a lot of possibilities that can help both, even the three. So the countries of origin, the migrants, and the countries where the migrants want to immigrate. I would say that from my experience in Germany, the most important key for the integration is language training. If you don't speak the language, you have problems for integration into the labor market. So I think that the European Union should focus a lot on language training, or the member states in Europe should focus on language training, because this facilitates then the integration. So language is a prerequisite, and then working, so having a job and doing something, being in contact with other people, is then the booster of the integration. So I would say this that allowing migrants to work swiftly is something that facilitates even then the integration into the society, and helps integrating on the labor market, because the people, they train on the job, they learn, and the access to education is something where concerning the different labor markets, you can boost the uptake of the labor force in those countries. So for me, these are the key elements in order to help integration.
Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Yavchan, what would be your opinion about this whole matter?
I agree with all that's been said, and I'd like to bring in the politics and public opinion perspective that we have mentioned earlier into answering this question. I think it's also important to consider, while we want to integrate these populations into the labor market, it's also important that we socially welcome them, and it's not possible with a hostile language discourse at the political level. So the framing of this issue is very important. Instead of talking about immigrants violating certain rules or unemployed, we could also talk about the good examples, the role models, and that do integrate really well, and that can be good examples for their own community as well. So I think this whole easy political gain perspective from promoting anti-immigrant attitudes is actually quite bad for migrants themselves and for the host communities, who end up having to live with them at the end of the day. So I think our political discourse should also promote mutual learning and peaceful coexistence at the local level.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Yavchan. Any final remarks from any of you, or any reactions to what your colleagues have said?
Yeah, I'd like to add about that something that it is necessary to integrate them into, as she said, integrate them into work, and also integrate in the social life. And that means the integration in the educational system, integration into associations, and so they will have networks with native populations, so they don't stay in a separate place from them with so they will marry and we don't marry with them, or we are not friends with people from other origin. It's very important we help a society to have networks or mixed networks, and I think a lot of can be done from municipalities, from national governments, regional governments, and also from EU, helping civil society to establish bridges. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Mr. Rutschen, Mrs. Yavchan?
If I may come in, I just want to say that it's a question for the individual as well. People have to be open-minded, have to be willing to integrate, and society, communities, people living in communities have to be willing to integrate migrants. So it's something where people can do a lot. It's not only about policy frameworks. It's a lot about people doing steps, going to the others, and everybody has prejudices. But if those prejudices, as you just said, are met with reality, a lot of those prejudices disappear. Perhaps not all, but a lot of them disappear. And it's much easier to if you know each other, it's much easier to live together. So it's about the people to do steps in order to facilitate integration on the one hand, and this has to come from migrants from the one side and from people in those communities on the other side.
Any final words, Mrs. Yavchan, very briefly?
I can just agree with all that has been said, and maybe say that it is really a multi-level fight, a liberal fight against these negative attitudes. And it's not easy. The easier way is just going along. But I think we have the ability to question and to understand each other. And I hope that meetings like this also will contribute and reach the right audiences.
Well, we have run out of time. It has been a very interesting panel, and I would really like to thank the guests on behalf of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, Mr. Jean-Christophe Rutschen, Mrs. Başak Yavchan, and Mrs. Maria Millar. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today. We would like to invite all of our audience to keep connected to watch the remaining parts of the 2021 Euromina show of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, and also to follow the Foundation's social media accounts in order to keep posted on what is going on. Thank you very much indeed.